The words hit me like a slap across the face at my own dining table. "Shut up, you widow," my daughter-in-law Sandra spat, her fork clattering against her plate. "Nobody wants to hear your ancient stories anymore." I felt the blood drain from my cheeks as silence fell over the Sunday dinner I had spent all morning preparing. My son Michael avoided my eyes, suddenly fascinated by his mashed potatoes. My youngest daughter Emma shifted uncomfortably, while her husband Dave cleared his throat awkwardly. Even my grandchildren, 12-year-old Sophie and 14-year-old Jake, looked mortified. But Sandra wasn't finished. She leaned back in her chair, wineglass in hand, her voice dripping with disdain. "Ever since Dad died, you've become this burden, always talking about the past, always interrupting our conversations with your irrelevant opinions. We're trying to discuss real life here, jobs, mortgages, our children's futures, not your ancient memories about some dead man." The dead man she referred to so callously was my beloved husband Robert, who had passed away 18 months earlier after 43 years of marriage. The man who had built the very house we were sitting in, who had worked 2 jobs to put Michael through college, who had taught Jake how to ride a bike in the backyard just 3 summers ago. I looked around the table at the faces of my family. People I had sacrificed everything for, people I had loved unconditionally, people I had bailed out of financial trouble more times than I could count. And in that moment, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. They saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. "You know what?" Sandra continued, emboldened by the silence. "Maybe it's time you considered one of those senior living places, somewhere you can bore other old people with your stories. We need our space, our lives back. We can't keep tiptoeing around your feelings forever." I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of them. Instead, I slowly stood up from my chair, the chair at the head of the table that I had occupied for 27 years in this house. "You're absolutely right, Sandra," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I am just a widow, and you don't need to tiptoe around my feelings anymore." I walked to the coat closet, retrieved my purse and jacket, and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Michael finally find his voice. "Mom, wait." But I didn't wait. I couldn't. I walked out of my own home and drove to the only place that had ever truly felt like sanctuary, the small apartment above Robert's old hardware store downtown, which I had kept exactly as he left it. As I sat in Robert's worn leather chair that night, surrounded by his tools and the familiar smell of wood polish and motor oil, I made a decision that would change everything. I opened my laptop, the one Emma had taught me to use so I could stay connected, and began to make some calls. You see, what my family didn't know, what they had never bothered to ask about, was exactly what Robert and I had built together, over 4 decades. They saw an old widow living in a big house, collecting Social Security, and occasionally writing small checks for their emergencies. They had no idea that the irrelevant old woman they had just humiliated controlled assets. Worth over $3.2 million, Robert hadn't just owned a hardware store. He had owned 3 hardware stores, 2 rental properties, and had made some very shrewd investments in local real estate during the recession of 2008. When he passed, everything had transferred to me, along with his seat on the board of directors, of the local bank and his shares in several local businesses. But here's what really set my plan in motion. 6 months ago, when Michael's business was failing, I had co-signed a $180,000 business loan for him. When Sandra's boutique was struggling, I had quietly purchased the building she rented and reduced her rent to almost nothing, though she thought she was dealing with a generous landlord through my lawyer. When Dave lost his job last year, I had anonymously arranged for him to be hired at one of the companies where Robert's old business partner held influence. They thought I was just a lonely old widow living off memories. They had no idea I was the invisible hand that had been holding their lives together. The next morning, I called my lawyer, James Morrison, who had been Robert's friend for 30 years. Margaret. His voice was warm but concerned. How are you? Holding up, dear? I'm done holding up, James. I'm ready to let go. There was a pause. What do you need me to do? I want Michael's loan called in. Immediately. I want Sandra's lease terminated. Legally, of course. I want Dave's employment. Situation. Clarified. And I want the house sold. Margaret, are you sure about this? These are big steps. James, yesterday my daughter-in-law called me a burden and suggested I move to a nursing home. This was at a dinner I cooked, in a house I own, at a table I've set every Sunday for 27 years. They made it very clear that I'm no longer welcome in my own family, so I'm giving them exactly what they want, their lives back. The silence on the other end stretched for a long moment. Finally, James spoke. I'll need a day to put everything in motion legally. Are you prepared for the fallout? James, I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. I just didn't know it until yesterday. By Tuesday morning, the pieces began falling into place with the precision of a Swiss watch. Michael's phone rang at 9:47 a.m. It was the bank. His business loan, all $180,000 of it, was being called in immediately due to changes in the co-signer's financial situation. He had 30 days to pay in full or face foreclosure on both his business and his home, which he had used as collateral. 11:15 a.m. Sandra received a certified letter informing her that her lease would not be renewed and that she had 60 days to vacate the premises. The generous rent reduction she had been receiving was being rescinded, and she now owed 3 months of back rent at the market rate, a total of $18,000. At 2:30 p.m., Dave received a call from his supervisor. There had been budget cuts, and his position was being eliminated. His last day would be Friday, but I wasn't finished. At 4:00 p.m., a for sale sign went up in the front yard of the house where they had humiliated me just 48 hours earlier. The house where Michael and Emma had grown up, where Christmas mornings had been filled with laughter, where Robert had taught his grandchildren to fish in the backyard pond. The asking price was $850,000, exactly the current market value. The phone started ringing at 4:23 p.m. Mom, what the hell is going on? Michael's voice was panicked, desperate. The bank called about the loan, and now there's a for sale sign on your house? Are you having some kind of breakdown? No, son. I'm having a breakthrough. For the first time in 18 months, I'm thinking clearly. But Mom, you can't sell the house. This is our family home. Where will you live? Where will we have Sunday? Dinners? I almost laughed at the irony. Michael, according to your wife, I'm a burden who should be in a nursing home. I'm simply giving you what you want. Your lives back, without me in them. Mom, Sandra didn't mean... She meant every word, Michael, and you sat there and let her say it. In my house, at my table, after eating food I prepared with my own hands. Not one of you defended me. Not one of you told her she was wrong. Your silence spoke louder than her words. I could hear him breathing hard on the other end. What do you want from us? Nothing, Michael. I want nothing from any of you. And that's exactly what you're going to get. Emma called 20 minutes later, tears in her voice. Mom, please, let's talk about this. Dave lost his job today, and I know it can't be a coincidence. You're right, it's not a coincidence. But it's not revenge either, sweetheart. It's just me removing myself from your lives like you wanted. Dave got that job because of connections your father built over 40 years. Now that I'm just a burden to be discarded, those connections are being dissolved. But Mom, you need me, Emma. Really? Because on Sunday, when Sandra called me a burden and suggested I move to a nursing home, you sat there in silence. When she said nobody wanted to hear my ancient stories about your father, the man who walked you down the aisle at your wedding, you said nothing. So forgive me if I question what you actually need from me. Wednesday brought Sandra's call. Her voice was shrill with panic and rage. You vindictive old bitch. You think you can destroy our lives because your feelings got hurt? I'm going to sue you for everything you're worth. Sandra, I said calmly. You're welcome to try. But you might want to consult with a lawyer first. You'll discover that I have acted completely within my legal rights. Every loan I co-signed, every favor I arranged, every kindness I extended was at my discretion. I am under no legal obligation to continue supporting people who view me as a burden. You can't just throw us out on the street. I'm not throwing you anywhere, dear. I'm simply stepping back and letting you handle your own lives. Isn't that what you wanted? Independence from the irrelevant old woman with her ancient stories? This is different, and you know it. The only difference, Sandra, is that now you understand the consequences of your choices. You wanted me out of your life. Congratulations. You got exactly what you asked for. Thursday evening, I received an unexpected visitor. My grandson Jake knocked on the door of the apartment above the hardware store. When I opened it, I could see he had been crying. "Grandma, please," he said, his 14-year-old voice cracking. "I know Mom said terrible things on Sunday, but please don't sell the house. Please don't take away our family." I invited him in and made him hot chocolate, the same way I had been making it for him since he was 5 years old. "Jake, sweetheart, I need you to understand something. I'm not taking away our family. Your mother already did that when she decided I was just a burden to be discarded. But I don't think you're a burden. I love hearing your stories about Grandpa in the old days. Sophie does too. We didn't say anything on Sunday because adults are supposed to handle adult problems, right? We didn't know what to say." I felt my heart crack a little. Here was a 14-year-old boy showing more wisdom and compassion than the adults in his family. "Jake, do you know what your grandfather used to tell me when we faced difficult decisions?" He shook his head. He said, "Margaret, people will show you exactly who they are if you pay attention. Believe them the first time. Your mother showed me exactly who she thinks I am. And more importantly, your father and your Aunt Emma showed me that they agree with her assessment by their silence. But what about us? Sophie and me? We didn't do anything wrong. This was the hardest part, the collateral damage that comes when a family implodes. You're right, Jake, you and Sophie are innocent in all this. But here's what I've learned in my 67 years. Sometimes loving someone means letting them face the consequences of their choices, even when it hurts everyone involved." He was quiet for a long moment, then looked up at me with eyes that seemed far too old for his 14 years. "Are you going to abandon us forever?" "Oh, sweetheart." I pulled him into a hug that smelled like teenage boy and heartbreak. "I could never abandon you. But I can't continue to enable adults who treat me like garbage while expecting me to solve all their problems. There's a difference." Friday morning brought the most surprising call of all. It was my daughter Emma, but her voice was different, smaller, more uncertain than I had heard since she was a little girl. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Dave and we talked all night. Really talked. Maybe for the first time in years. And he told me something I didn't know." I waited. He told me that when he lost his job last year, a man called him out of the blue with a job offer. A man who said he had heard Dave was talented and hardworking, and that good men deserved good opportunities. Dave never questioned it. He was just grateful. But now he realizes, that was you, wasn't it? Your father had many friends in this town, Emma. Mom, please don't deflect. This was you. And the reduced rent on Sandra's boutique that she's always bragging about, that's you too, isn't it? And Michael's loan? You co-signed it, didn't you? I remained silent. Oh my God. Her voice broke. Mom, how long have you been? How many times have you saved us without us knowing? Emma, no, let me finish. I need to say this. Sunday night, after you left, Dave and I had a fight. A bad one. He said I was a coward for not defending you, and he was right. I sat there and watched Sandra destroy you, and I did nothing. I told myself I was staying out of it, that it wasn't my place to interfere in Michael's marriage. But that was bullshit, wasn't it? It was cowardice, pure and simple. I could hear her crying now. I've been thinking about something you said once, years ago. You told me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you when life gets hard. And Mom, you've been showing up for all of us, over and over again, in ways we didn't even know about. But when you needed us to show up for you on Sunday, we failed. I failed. Emma, I'm not calling to ask you to change your mind about the house or the loans or any of it. I'm calling to tell you that you're right to be angry. You're right to protect yourself. And I'm calling to tell you that I love you, and I'm sorry. And if you'll let me, I want to try to earn your forgiveness. This was the conversation I had been hoping for, the acknowledgement I had needed. But it came with its own complications. Emma, I love you too. I have never stopped loving any of you, not for 1 second. But love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Love doesn't mean sacrificing my dignity so others can feel comfortable treating me poorly. I know that now. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. When you made all these arrangements to help us over the years, why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think we were managing on our own? It was a fair question, one I had been asking myself, because I wanted you to have your pride, your sense of accomplishment. I wanted you to believe in your own strength. But mostly, I suppose, because I thought it was what good mothers do. They help their children without expecting credit or gratitude. But Mom, don't you see? By hiding your help, you also hid your worth. We took your support for granted because we didn't realize it existed. We saw you as just Mom, just Grandma, not as the woman who was actively holding our lives together. Her words hit me like a revelation. In trying to be selfless, I had made myself invisible. In trying to protect their pride, I had diminished my own value in their eyes. You're right, I admitted. I made myself dispensable by pretending I was. Dispensable. You're not dispensable, Mom. This week has shown us exactly how indispensable you are. And now we have to live with the knowledge that we threw away the most precious thing in our lives because we couldn't see its value. Saturday morning, I was surprised to see Michael's car pull up outside the hardware store. But it wasn't Michael, who got out. It was his 12-year-old daughter, Sophie, followed by Jake. They climbed the stairs to my apartment with the determination of children on a mission. Grandma, Sophie said without preamble, we've come to negotiate. Despite everything, I had to smile. Negotiate what, sweetheart? A peace treaty, Jake said seriously, between you and our parents. Kids, this isn't something. Please just listen, Sophie interrupted, her young face earnest. Jake and we've been talking. We know what Mom said on Sunday was wrong. We know Dad should have defended you. We know everyone messed up really badly. But Grandma, Jake continued, we also know you're not really the kind of person who destroys families. Grandpa used to tell us stories about how you always found ways to fix things, even when they seemed impossible to fix. Sophie nodded vigorously. He said you were the strongest person he ever knew because you could be strong and kind. At the same time, he said that was your superpower. I felt tears threatening again. Robert had said those exact words to me many times over the years. So here's our proposal, Jake said, pulling out a piece of notebook paper covered in careful handwriting. We think the adults in our family need to learn some lessons. Big lessons. But we also think maybe there's a way for everyone to learn those lessons without destroying everything forever. Sophie took over. We did some research online. Research? About loan forgiveness and family mediation and restorative justice, Jake said proudly. We're not just kids, Grandma. We understand more than adults think we do. I looked at these two young people, my grandchildren, who had taken it upon themselves to try to heal their fractured family. "What exactly are you proposing?" Sophie consulted their paper. "First, Mom has to apologize to you. Not just, 'I'm sorry,' but a real apology where she admits exactly what she did wrong and why it was wrong. Second," Jake continued, "Dad has to take responsibility for not defending you and for letting you support us financially without acknowledging it or appreciating it. Third, Aunt Emma has to make her own apology for being a coward. Her word, not ours. Fourth," Sophie said, "Uncle Dave has to find his own job without any help from family connections to prove he can do it. And fifth," Jake concluded, "everyone has to go to family counseling, together, for at least 6 months." I stared at them in amazement. "And if they agree to all this, then maybe you could consider not selling the house right away," Sophie said hopefully. "Maybe give them a chance to prove they've learned something." "But Grandma," Jake added seriously, "if they don't agree, or if they agree and then don't follow through, then you should absolutely sell the house and move on with your life. Because you deserve better than people who treat you like garbage." These children, these beautiful, wise children, had managed to articulate what I had been struggling to understand all week. I didn't want to destroy my family. I wanted to save it. But saving it meant forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about how we had been relating to each other. "There's one more thing," Sophie said quietly. "We want you to know that even if our parents are too proud or too stubborn to do what's right, Jake and I will never stop loving you. And when we're old enough to make our own choices about where to spend holidays and birthdays and stuff, we're going to choose you. Because you're the best person we know." That did it. I started crying, really crying, for the first time since Sunday dinner. But they weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of hope. Sunday morning, exactly 1 week after the dinner, that had changed everything. I called a family meeting. I told everyone to come to the hardware store at 2 p.m., and that attendance was non-negotiable if they wanted any chance of reconciliation. They all came. Michael and Sandra, Emma and Dave, Sophie and Jake. I had spent the morning thinking about what Robert would have wanted me to do, not what he would have done. Robert was always more forgiving than I was, sometimes to a fault. But what he would have wanted for our family, for our grandchildren, for the legacy we had built together. "I've had a week to think," I began, "and to remember who I am. I am not just a widow living in the past. I am a woman who has loved you all unconditionally, who has supported you in ways you never knew about, and who deserves better than to be called a burden in her own home." Sandra started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. This week, you've all learned what life looks like without my support. Michael, your business is in jeopardy. Sandra, your boutique is closing. Dave, you're unemployed. And Emma, you're facing the reality that your family's financial stability was more fragile than you realized." I looked at each of them in turn. I didn't cause these problems to hurt you. I caused them to wake you up, to help you understand that the irrelevant old woman you were so eager to dismiss has been the foundation your lives were built on. Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, You'll have your chance to speak, Michael. Right now I need you to listen. Because what happens next depends entirely on whether you're capable of learning from this experience." I outlined the children's proposal, their peace treaty, and watched as the adults struggled with the conditions. Real apologies, acknowledgement of responsibility, family counseling, independence where it had been lacking. "These terms are not negotiable," I said firmly. "And they come with a timeline. You have until Christmas, 8 weeks, to prove that. You can treat me with the respect and appreciation I deserve. If you can do that, we'll revisit the question of selling the house." Sandra was the first to speak, and I braced myself for another explosion. Instead, her voice was small and shaky. "Mrs. Sullivan, I need to tell you something. This week, when I thought I was losing the boutique, I realized something awful about myself. I've been jealous of you for years. Jealous of how much Michael respects you. Jealous of how the kids adore you. Jealous of the marriage you had with Mr. Sullivan. And on Sunday, when you were telling that story about your anniversary trip, all I could think about was how Michael and I haven't been on a real vacation in 3 years because we're always struggling with money. She was crying now, ugly tears that made her mascara run. I took out my jealousy and frustration on you, and I said horrible, unforgivable things. I called you a burden when the truth is, I felt like a burden, like a failure, and it was easier to tear you down than to face my own shortcomings. It wasn't the apology I had expected, but it was honest in a way that Sandra had never been before. Michael was next. Mom, I failed you as a son. When Sandra said those things, I should have stopped her immediately. I should have defended you, should have reminded everyone that you were speaking at your own table in your own home. Instead, I took the coward's way out and stayed silent because sometimes it's easier to let Sandra be the bad guy than to stand up to her myself. He looked at his wife, then back at me. I've been letting you solve my problems for years while pretending I was handling things on my own. The loan you co-signed, the connections you helped me make. I knew, Mom. Maybe not the details, but I knew you were helping more than you admitted. And I let you do it while taking credit for my own success. Emma's apology was the hardest to hear because it came from the child I had always been closest to. Mom, I convinced myself that staying neutral was the mature thing to do. But there was nothing neutral about watching someone attack you and doing nothing. I abandoned you when you needed me most, and I did it to avoid conflict. I'm ashamed of myself, and I understand if you can't forgive me. Dave, surprisingly, was the most direct. Mrs. Sullivan, I've never properly thanked you for the opportunities you've created for me over the years. I always suspected there was more to my good fortune than luck, but I was afraid to ask because I didn't want to feel indebted. This week taught me that gratitude isn't the same as indebtedness. It's just basic human decency. I looked at my family, broken, humbled, but finally honest, and felt something shift inside me. The anger was still there, but it was no longer the driving force. What I felt now was sadness for all the years we had wasted on pride and assumptions and unspoken resentments. I accept your apologies, I said finally. But accepting an apology isn't the same as forgetting what happened or pretending it doesn't matter. Trust, once broken, has to be rebuilt brick by brick. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. With the pretenses stripped away and the truth finally spoken, my family began to change in ways I hadn't expected. Michael and Sandra enrolled in both individual and couples counseling. Sandra got a part-time job at a local boutique to help make ends meet while she figured out her next steps. Michael started actively working to save his business instead of expecting me to solve his problems for him. Emma and Dave had several difficult conversations about their marriage and their financial habits. Dave threw himself into job hunting with a determination I hadn't seen from him in years. Emma started volunteering at the senior center downtown, later telling me that spending time with other older adults had helped her understand what she had almost lost. But the most meaningful change was in our family dinners. We started meeting at the hardware store apartment instead of the big house, and the atmosphere was completely different. Conversation was more genuine, more careful, more appreciative. When I told stories about Robert or about their childhoods, people actually listened instead of tolerating. 3 weeks before Christmas, Dave got a job offer from a company 2 towns over. It meant a longer commute and slightly less pay than his previous position, but he had earned it entirely on his own merit. His pride in the accomplishment was evident, and it was a pride I could respect because it was honestly earned. Michael managed to restructure his business loan and find new investors. Though it meant giving up some control and accepting a smaller profit margin, the stress had aged him, but it had also matured him in ways that success alone never could have. Sandra's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic. Losing the boutique had forced her to confront some harsh realities about her spending habits and her relationship with money. She started seeing a financial counselor and took a job at a department store in the mall. It was humbling work for someone who had owned her own business, but she approached it with a determination that surprised everyone, including herself. 2 weeks before Christmas, I made a decision. I called off the sale of the house, but I didn't move back in. Instead, I announced that the house would become our official family gathering place, but that I would continue living in the apartment above the hardware store. It was a compromise that felt right to me. I could maintain my independence while still preserving the space where our family memories lived. Christmas morning was different that year. We opened presents in the living room where Robert and I had celebrated 42 Christmas mornings together, but the dynamics had fundamentally changed. I was no longer the family matriarch managing everyone's needs and emotions. I was simply Margaret, a woman who had learned to value herself enough to demand better treatment. Sandra gave me a small wrapped box that made me cry. Inside was a simple silver bracelet engraved with the words, "Thank you for not giving up on us." Michael's gift was a photo album he had made, filled with pictures of Robert and me throughout our marriage, along with handwritten notes from all the family members sharing their favorite memories of both of us. But the most precious gift came from Jake and Sophie. They had written and illustrated a children's book called The Grandma Who Saved Christmas. It was the story of a wise grandmother who had to teach her family about respect and gratitude. And while the story was clearly fiction, the love behind it was absolutely real. As I write this now, 6 months after that terrible Sunday dinner, I can honestly say that my family is stronger than it's ever been. Not because we avoided conflict, but because we faced it head-on and came through the other side. Michael's business is thriving under his new, more realistic approach to management. Sandra has started her own small online boutique, working from my home and building it slowly without the pressure of expensive overhead. Dave loves his new job and has even been promoted once. Emma has become one of my closest confidants, calling me several times a week just to talk. The grandchildren and I have a special tradition now. Every Saturday morning, they come to the hardware store apartment and help me sort through Robert's old things. We're slowly cataloging 40 years of memories, and in the process, they're learning stories about their grandfather and their family history that they never would have heard otherwise. But perhaps the most important change is in how I see myself. I am no longer the invisible hand working behind the scenes to make everyone else's life easier. I am Margaret Sullivan, a woman of substance, a woman of means, a woman who has learned that loving someone doesn't mean accepting their abuse. I think about that terrible moment when Sandra called me just a widow and told me to shut up, and I realize now that it was exactly what I needed to hear. Not because it was true, but because it was so outrageously false that it shocked me into remembering who I really am. I am not just anything. I am a woman who built a life alongside a man I loved deeply. I am a mother who raised 2 children and helped them become adults. I am a grandmother who has wisdom to share and love, to give. I am a business owner, a property owner, a woman of influence in my community. Most importantly, I am a woman who learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to stop enabling their worst behaviors and start demanding their best. The Sunday dinners continue, but they're different now. When I tell stories about Robert or about their childhoods, people lean in and listen. When I offer advice, it's received with gratitude instead of tolerance. When I speak, no one tells me to shut up, because they've learned what I learned that terrible Sunday night. That respect isn't something you give to people out of obligation. It's something you earn and maintain through your actions, your choices, and your character. And sometimes, when you've forgotten your own worth, life has a way of reminding you, even if the reminder comes in the form of the cruelest words spoken by someone you love. The woman who walked out of that house 6 months ago was broken and defeated. The woman who tells this story today is whole, strong, and surrounded by a family who finally understands her value. That's not revenge. That's redemption. And it's never too late to reclaim your worth, no matter what anyone else thinks you're just.